French maestros Delphine Software International had a brief but memorable run in the video game industry. Active chiefly in the 90s, several of their games have been the focus of groundbreaking and innovative moments in video games. Indeed, so groundbreaking that one of their games, Another World, popularized a subgenre that's stylish in execution and agony to master. Then there was the cinematic platform game Flashback, which bore a similarity to Prince of Persia, both in gameplay and its use of rotoscoped animation. And they were also known for their Moto Racer series. In their short foray into developing under the Delphine Software International banner, the crew behind one of the greatest developers worked tirelessly, passionately, and most importantly, with this intention and philosophy that art and games need not to be two separate things. Games like Flashback, Another World, Fade to Black and Future Wars all corroborate this, and should a whisper of doubt form in your head, you need only play few minutes of their masterpieces to erase it. So, for this video I wanted to look at the history of Delphine and the games released from its humble beginnings to the sad end of the company's journey. The company was founded in 1988 as a subsidiary of Delphine Group in Paris, France, by Paul Di Cineville, who acted as the head director, and the unsung gaming hero Paul Cousette, who, in addition to being the co-director, would also be the lead designer for several of their games. In 1989, just a year after formation, DSI released their first video game, Castle Warrior, a sort of Zork imagined as an ultimate underworld and a third-person view dungeon crawler. Thought up by Michael Sporttouch and given life by Emmanuel Licos, Castle Warrior never made it to the spotlight, instead staying in the darkest corner of shadows, only stumbled upon by the ever-curious. The game is notable in the fact that it was one of the first video games that composer Jean Botlot worked on, a recurring name in the timeline of DSI. The game was released on the Commodore Amiga and the Atari ST. So, let's have a look at the Amiga version, starting off with the plot of the game. 50 years ago, there was a battleground which lay between two nations. Endewulf the Great and his army fought it out with their opponents and triumphed, Endewulf taking the crown and uniting the two countries. Peace and tranquility and all that malarkey reigned, and everything was hunky-dory. Eventually, Endewulf died and was succeeded by his eldest son, Eldred the Good. He was a pretty decent bloke as well, ruling with a fair hand and not imposing too much tax on the population. However, not everyone in the country was happy. Xandor, an evil wizard, had been banished to a castle on the farthest part of the bleakest corner of the kingdom. And he was a fairly grumpy sort of guy, so he decided to get rid of Eldred and seize the kingdom for himself. I suppose he must be a pretty hot wizard, evil or not, because he managed to get himself inside the castle's defences and poison the king's food. Blimey, things are looking a bit grim. So, the king is ringing death's doorbell and no one knows of an antidote. No one, that is, except Xandor, Eldred the Brave, who has volunteered to find Xandor and force the cure out of him. Now, the game has 6 levels to hack your way through before you can get the antidote safely to the king. The first is the Corridor of Death, leading to Xandor's castle. You must slash your way through a variety of bloodthirsty beasts, including a huge golden snake and a massive green giant, except this one isn't selling sweet corn, both of which can only be destroyed by returning their own fireballs. The first level is in a Space Harrier sort of vein. The 3D update is fine, but the animation makes Castle Warrior's movements as convincing as those of Bod. Come on, you must remember Bod. And as you charge down the corridor at an awesomely mundane pace, the idea is to dodge, avoid, or just simply slash everything that gets in your way. This would be a lot more exciting and a lot less frustrating if it wasn't for the fact that due to the size of the sprites, only a dozen or so on-screen positions are available for your hero. So the result is he either escapes or is hit in a jerky and awkward fashion. And at the end of the tunnel is the dragon Olossus, who guards the river. And this unpleasant character, well, he spits fire at you in between attempts to catch you in his wicked sharp claws. So, you need to be careful. Next, you have to navigate the underground river. And you will need to avoid those rocks and stalactites which try to fall on you. And at the end of the river is the Jibba, who is tackled in the same way as the dragon. And penultimately, you have to confront Xander, who sits on a throne throwing spells. Kill Xander with a sword and collect the antidote, and then you can set off to save your father. So, there you go. So, what do I think of this game? Well, generally speaking, the graphics in Castle Warrior are fine. The tunnel scrolling is a bit poor, but everything else looks good. The dragons are impressive, and the animation is smooth, and the colour has been used to great effect. And I suppose the sound is even better. I suppose Edred's footfalls are convincing, and the rest of the FX aren't really anything special, but this is made up for by a brilliant tune. But unfortunately, good looks and good sounds aren't everything. Despite the slick presentation, there's quite a bit missing from the gameplay. The first level moves annoyingly slow. You find yourself instinctively pushing the joystick forward to move things along faster. The second level, well, that looks good, but unfortunately, the sheer lack of content makes it very boring after a while, and since the fourth level is almost identical in every respect except the graphics, the same applies. So for me, this rather lowers the lastability of the game. Still, it is well presented, and if you place importance on high-class graphics and sound, you'll find it more enjoyable than would someone who couldn't care less as long as it plays well. So, there you go, that was the first game by Delphine Software. And don't worry, it's going to get a lot better. Okay, so the next game is a 1989 side-scrolling beat-em-up, and that game is Bio Challenge. And I have to say, this game also never achieved the spotlight status, though it did give a glimpse of what the company would ultimately utilise and be well known for. However, despite not reaching the masses initially, it is held as one of Amiga's best games by fans of the system. And this game, well, it's set in the future where human existence is threatened. The gene code has become weaker in every generation and is getting close to frailty. So, scientists build a cyborg to save the human beings. To test this cyborg, they send him out for a bio challenge. You play the cyborg and therefore you take this challenge, and your only mission is to survive. It's a slightly difficult 2D platform game with nice graphics and animations. Bio Challenge has a bizarre enough plot and some mean character animation, plus decent parallax scrolling and a night-day cycle shift. Also, Jean Botlet also returns, and this time with a catchy tune that is bound to find its way to your playlist. Let's have a little look at the game. Now, DCI's first success came later in the year when they hired Eric Chachi, a relatively unknown person at the time, to work on their next game, Future Wars. Future Wars, subtitled in Europe as Time Travelers and in North America as Adventures in Time, and known in France as Time Travelers The Menace, is an adventure game from Delphine Software, released in 1989. The game is mainly the work of Paul Cousette, story and programmer, and Eric Chachi, who done the graphics. Future Wars proved to be a great hit for the company, who were then recently suffering from the disappointing James Bond spin-off, Operation Stealth. We'll cover that. And the striking production and a time-travelling story made Future Wars a success, and is nowadays thought as one of the greatest point-and-click adventure games. Now, the game was actually intended to be the first of a series of adventure games revolving around time travelling, but later episodes were never actually made. So, let's have a look at the game. What is this game all about? Well, in the year 1989, a simple window cleaner is working outside of a skyscraper. Intending to play a prank on his angry boss, the unlikely hero discovers a secret passage leading to a time machine, along with mysterious alien documents. Operating the device transports the protagonist to the year 1304, where he is given a seemingly ordinary task of rescuing a lady in danger. However, he soon finds out about a much more serious threat of a global alien invasion. The hero has to travel to the remote future of the 44th century and eventually to the even more remote past of the Cretaceous period to foil their plans. Future Wars is a graphic adventure game and the first to use Delphine's proprietary cinematic point-and-click interface. A right click brings up the verb menu. After choosing one of the 6 commands, the player points the mouse over the desired target and executes the action with a left click. Small objects are depicted by enlarged drawings once they have been discovered. However, many of them are well hidden and often require precise positioning on the part of the player character to discover. The game has a linear story advancement, and it is possible to die or become stuck by failing to locate a crucial item in one of the previous locations. And finally, upon release, Future Wars received positive reviews. Computing Gaming World praised the game's story as good, its graphics as very imaginative and at times absolutely striking, and its musical score as a respectable soundtrack, which many will consider superior to most of those composed and released by theatrical films, but stated the same graphical detail was frequently hiding important objects vital to solving the game and hindering the player's movement in certain cases. It also criticised the cinematic engine as not quite the innovation Future War designers claimed it to be. Similar features have appeared in games by Sierra as well as Lucasfilm. I do suppose Lucasfilm did set the standard. They were the ones to beat. I have to say I like the Lucasfilm games, Secret and Monkey Island, all that kind of stuff. Very good. Okay, next up is Operation Stealth, also known as 007 James Bond, the stealth affair in the United States, and it's a 1990 adventure game, mainly the work of Paul Cuisset and John Bodlett. And as I mentioned, the game was released with the Bond license in the United States, although this did lead to some inconsistencies as the M16 agent appeared to be taking his orders from the CIA. Operation Stealth mainly features a point-and-click style of gameplay reminiscent of many of the LucasArts adventures of the time, as well as a number of more action-oriented elements, including an overhead-viewed maze section and a scene in which Bond attempts to escape from an underwater cavern before he runs out of oxygen. The Amiga version of the game features a primitive synthesized voice that would perform all the dialogue in the game if a 1MB or more RAM was installed. However, this also featured a bug, which meant that if the player attempted to click the mouse button in order to skip through the speech faster, the game would freeze and have to be rebooted. Computer Gaming World described the game as somewhat of a disappointment. The magazine criticised the game's hidden object game-like interface and clumsy parser and stated that the graphics and music were inferior to the Future Wars and that the central plot had little connection to the game's puzzles and arcade sequences. And the US magazine gave the game 4.5 stars and wrote, "The innovative interface is elegant in its simplicity and very easy to use. The stunning graphics are sharp, detailed and complemented by first-rate sound and animation." And goes on to say that no Bond fan should miss this one. So there you go, that was the game Operation Stealth. It was not until the 90s came about that Delphine Software's presence was noticed on the map. Starting in 1990 and 1991, the release of Another World, also known as Outer World and Out of This World, marked the start of their brief but successful and influential run. The game tells the story of Lester, a young scientist who, as a result of an experiment gone wrong, finds himself on a dangerous alien world where he is forced to fight for his survival. Now, before we go on, I just want you to look at this intro. This intro certainly influenced me as a young gamer. It was amazing to see at the time, and it wasn't a CD game, this was a cartridge game in the Genesis. But what we're looking at here is the Amiga version. Let's have a look. Wow, brilliant. Loved that. Anyway, Another World was developed by Eric Chachi, alone over a period of about 2 years, with the help of the soundtrack from Jean-Francois Freitas. Chachi developed his own game engine, creating all the game's art and animations in vector form to reduce memory use, with some use of rotoscoping to help plan out characters' movements. Both narratively and gameplay wise, he wanted the game to be told with little to no language or user interface elements. The game was originally developed for the Amiga and Atari ST, but it has since been widely ported to other contemporary systems, including home and portable consoles and mobile devices. Chachi has since overseen release of various anniversary releases of the game. Another World was innovative in its use of cinematic effects in both real-time and cutscenes, which earned the game praise among critics and commercial success. It also influenced a number of other video games and designers, inspiring such titles as Ico, Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill, and Delphine's later Flashback. It is now considered among the best video games ever made. And looking at the game, well, you can see that Another World is a platform game featuring a control scheme where the player uses either the keyboard, joystick or gamepad to make the protagonist run, jump, attack and perform other situation-specific actions such as rocking a cage back and forth. In the initial part of the game, the player's character Lester is unarmed. He is able to kick at small creatures but is otherwise defenceless. Later in the game, the player acquires a laser pistol from a fallen foe. The pistol has 3 capabilities: a standard fire mode, the ability to create force fields to block enemy fire, and a powerful charged shot that can break through force fields and some walls. Enemies also have the same capabilities, requiring the player to take advantage of the 3 gun modes and the environment to overcome them. Lester and his alien ally cannot sustain any damage, and the game ends immediately if either of them is struck by a projectile or comes in contact with an animal or an environmental hazard. However, the game uses numerous checkpoints, enabling the player to keep restarting at the last point. On the Amiga and older consoles, without the ability to save a game, the player can write down a code for those checkpoints and re-enter it when restarting the game later. In any given scene, the game provides no clues as to what the player should do next, and it features no HUD except for an oxygen bar during the swimming sequences, and no on-screen text, and the characters the player meets speak in a completely alien language. And for me, playing this game for the first time way back in 1991, that was part of the charm of this game. It was all a mystery, and you were discovering the game as you were going along without any clues or hints. It was all pretty intensive and atmospheric stuff, I have to say. And with the release of the game, well, Eric Chachi made superstars out of DSi. But, unfortunately, he did not stick around. In fact, he quit sometime after the release of Another World and founded his own company, Amazing Studio, which only managed to release one game, Heart of Darkness, also a cinematic platform in the same vein of Another World, albeit with a more graphic presentation and deep emphasis on disturbing, unexpected deaths. And I do own this game on PlayStation 1, and I do remember playing it, and I thought it was a good game, but I have to say, it was a new generation of gaming back then when the PlayStation 1 came out. It was all about 3D graphics. It was all about 3D fighting, 3D shooters and 3D platforms. You know, Tomb Raider and so forth. So Heart of Darkness, as good as it was, it didn't quite live up to that expectation. Before I move on, it is worth mentioning that, although not developed by Delphine, there was actually a sequel to Another World, and that was Heart of the Alien, which was developed by Interplay Productions and was released by Virgin Interactive Entertainment in 1994 for the Sega CD, exclusively in North America. The story continues directly where the original ended. Although the game switches the player's role from Another World, this time the player takes control of Buddy, the main character's alien ally from the previous game. And Chachi, well, he had nothing to do with the development of the sequel either, beyond suggesting redesigning the game from the alien point of view, by which he meant making an alternative version of the original game, but was actually misunderstood. Eric Chachi recalled Interplay insisted in making the sequel in order to make the most of the CD-ROM's medium capabilities. After discussion, I agreed, rather than making a chronological development related to the first story, I decided that redesigning the game from the alien point of view was excellent and would make the player discover another world with other eyes. I could already picture scenes where Lester would be in the background fighting guards, while the player would control the alien in the foreground and then join our first hero, help him, etc. The concept was good, but alas, neither the animations nor the game, entirely developed by Interplay, were up to the job. It was a flop. Quickly after its release, Chachi made a public statement that the title did not represent his vision of the world he crafted and disowned it altogether from being treated as an official sequel. Dearie me. Anyway, we got a little bit sidetracked here. Let's get back to Delphine, shall we? Chachi's departure did not signal the end of the world for Delphine. In fact, they were just warming up. 1991 saw the release of Cruise for a Corpse, a game this author believes to have one of the coolest titles in video game history. Helmed by Philippe Chastel, Benoist Aaron and Paul Cousset himself, this point-and-click adventure game is designed as a murder investigation and puts you in the shoes of Ruel Duzentier, a French police inspector who is invited to Nicolas Caraboudin's boat for some quality time. However, soon upon arrival, Nicholas is murdered, and it's up to you to don the detective hat and solve a well-written whodunit. Drawing inspiration from retro murder novels, especially those of Agatha Christie, this game is a treat for lovers of intriguing story with death as the main backdrop. And this game uses many references to French and Belgian pop culture. Caraboudin is the name of the adventures of Tintin character Captain Haddock's cargo ship in the comic The Crab with the Golden Claws. And just like Crab with the Golden Claws, crab cans are used to hide objects. In the comic book, they contain opium, whereas in the game, they contained hand grenades. Now, Computer Gaming World called Cruise for a Corpse an admirable recipe for a classic adventure of murder most foul. The magazine liked the rotoscoped animation but criticised the EG graphics and atrocious code wheel-based copy protection, and concluded that while dedicated whodunit fans would enjoy the game, the general adventure gamer audience would probably find it a little bit tedious. Now, exactly 1 year after Cruise for a Corpse came a title that would over time would become famous with the company, almost gaining the title of an unofficial mascot. And that game is the brilliant Flashback, the quest for identity, or just Flashback for short. I mean, just the mere mention of this game will set in motion a chain reaction of memories and musings associated with the game, primarily among those who played it on the original systems back in the day. And this game certainly resembles Prince of Persia. And though Flashback indeed utilises a rotoscoping technique, it employs a more complicated version of it, thus resulting in a game far superior than its influence in terms of animation, story, characters, and just about everything else. I mean, upon its release, it was hailed by Guinness World Book of Records as the best-selling French video game of all time. About 750,000 copies were sold by 1995. Pretty impressive. Anyway, Flashback is set in a sci-fi futuristic world which sees you in control of Conrad B. Hart. You are an agent of the Galaxy Bureau of Investigation. After stumbling upon a plot to destroy Earth by using shape-shifting aliens who have disguised themselves as government officials, you are kidnapped and have your memory erased. But because Conrad is actually a smart dude, he made a backup copy of his memory and had it stored. Hence, he's able to get back everything that's rightfully his. Now he must deal with the rogue aliens and set everything right. All of the major tropes of this infant genre had established are present, and no expense spared. Every individual frame holds terrible yet seductive secrets. Danger is just around or below the corner. Objects are liable to give way any moment, and the deaths are swift. I mean, I was totally impressed when I saw Another World, but this game, well, it took it to a completely new level. It is a brilliant game. Released in 1992 to a wide range of systems, it is perhaps the Amiga original, Sega Genesis port and the DOS version that is fondly remembered by gamers today. Though nothing beats the original Amiga version, the other two versions are respectable in their own right though. It's also worth mentioning the DOS version has more cutscenes than the other two, and the author sees it fit to recommend newbies out there to have their first outing with this version. Although I have to say, I did like the Sega CD full motion video scenes. But, in saying all that, they're all good versions. It is a great game regardless what version you own. Anyway, Flashback has many features that were previously unseen. For example, your character, Conrad, he can take cover and even duck. And guess what? The enemies can do this also. A good strategy angle for the more methodological player. This certainly adds a whole new level of realism to an already realistic style of playing. Also, unlike others, Flashback also has a HUD, the heads-up display, and a point-and-click adventure-style option tray at the bottom of the screen. A fitting placement seen DCI's past repertoire. Flashback's excellent surpassing of the boundaries proved to be the pinnacle of DCI's and Paul Cusette's career. Indeed, its deliberate mechanics made it a perfect candidate to shift into 3D. Before Prince of Persia went 3D, and even before Tomb Raider took the Prince of Persia flashback style of exploration into immersive polygons, Delphine created Fade to Black, a fully 3D sequel to Flashback. And we'll have a look at that game in a moment. Now, I have to say, Flashback proved to be both a blessing and a curse for Delphine Software. Flashback's appeal and maturity did indeed bring Delphine on the map, marking them as a go-to company for great games, but simultaneously prevent them from making Another World or Flashback classic game again. Disaster struck and millions of hearts were broken when Delphine chose to combine the technique they had perfected with a basketball player. This marriage of two unlikely forces culminated in the ill-fated Shaq Fu, the single worst titled video game in the industry's history. So, Shaq Fu is a 2D fighting game developed by Delphine and published by Electronic Arts for the Sega Genesis and Super NES on October the 28th, 1994. Versions for the Game Gear, Game Boy and Amiga followed in 1995. And former professional basketball player Shaquille O'Neal is the player character. An egotistical embarrassment, Shaq Fu caused the downfall of an empire that never recovered. Though I have to say, Fade to Black did help a little, and we will cover that more later. So, featuring Shaquille O'Neal as the titular character and hero, you're thrown into a portal that's a gateway to magical worlds. Once there, you must fight other characters for glory in a typical fashion of versus fighting games. It was instantly and universally panned, ending up in several worst games of all time lists. It is total and utter pish. even despite the fact that Shaq Fu employs the same animation style as that of Flashback, as well as the same frame rate and identical hand-drawn backgrounds. It's still unresponsive controls, glitches, nonsensical setup and difficulty due to poor programming all contributed to the failure of the game and made it an epic for all the wrong reasons. And though it has since come to be considered one of the worst video games ever made, there was a sequel, Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn, which was released in 2018, and I will come back to that game nearer the end of this video, but I have to say it's also pish. Now, even with a failure in their hands with that Shaq Fu, Delphine displayed a sense of determination, and this showed perfectly in their 1995 release Fade to Black, possibly the final hurrah for the company. Fade to Black is the sequel to Flashback. At the end of the original game, Conrad Hart gained his freedom and escaped the evil morphs. But, unfortunately, he was caught and cryogenically frozen. Gee, I was talking about being unlucky. Anyway, 50 years later, Conrad is being sucked onto an alien spacecraft. As luck would have it, the aliens that saved him are the ones he was trying to escape from. Flippin' heck, really unlucky. And after being sent to New Alcatraz, Conrad befriends a human rebel who breaks him out of the prison and gives him a pistol and a communicator.
Something eventually found me. Saw my shuttle and beamed me aboard. The cryogenic cycle that had kept me in a deep sleep was suddenly interrupted. I came to and opened my eyes, only to realize that to my horror, I was back in the clutches of my worst enemy, the morphs. It didn't take them very long to decide my fate.
So, in the game, you take control of Conrad as he fights his way through 13 levels in an effort to regain his freedom. With the bulk of production done by Paul Cuisset, this sequel to Flashback, though could not emulate the worldwide appeal of its predecessor, emitted a ray of hope that the company still had life in them. In the making of Fade to Black, the company eschewed everything they had thus far practiced and what made their previous games unique from their contemporaries. Unlike its predecessor, Fade to Black utilises Gouraud shading in full 3D. Even so, for a computer game, Fade to Black isn't on the whole pretty, but it does get the job done. Furthermore, the use of 3D breathed new life into the game and gives a sense of freedom and open world, a feeling that of being trapped in by something much bigger than yourself. With just over an hour of gameplay, Fade to Black is surprisingly short. But for me, it certainly makes up for that by the level of freedom exercised in the game. And for me, Fade to Black is slightly better at gameplay than its predecessor, but that's just my opinion.
Maybe next time.
By now, releasing one game per year had become a thing of second nature for the crew of Delphine. Considering the vast technical and graphical aspects of their games and the size of the company, this was indeed an accomplishment. In 1997, the release of Moto Racer would not only take them out of their element, but also result in the only proper series they managed to string together before going defunct. And Moto Racer is an arcade-type motorcycle racing game that features both street and dirt bikes and is great for casual gamers and or fans of the racing genre. And this Electronic Arts published title was able to generate enough enthusiasm for 4 sequels, all developed by Delphine. And its first sequel is the cleverly named Moto Racer 2, which was released in 1998. And this sequel features more tracks, several different championship modes, an enhanced direct 3D graphics engine, and a track editor for creating your own superbike and motocross tracks. So, let's have a little look at the game, shall we? The 90s, especially in its middle and tail end years, saw a boom in role-playing games and real-time strategy video games, fueled and spearheaded by the likes of Diablo, StarCraft, Warcraft and the Final Fantasy series. Drawing inspiration from the original Diablo, Delphine decided to jump on the RPG bandwagon and crack their hands at this new moneymaker. The result was the slightly ignored but loved by fans Darkstone, their most ambitious, intricate and longest game ever. Darkstone Evil Reigns was released for Microsoft Windows and PlayStation. And in 2014, the French publisher Anumin Interactive launched a remake available on iPad, iPhone and Android with a cooperation of the original game's author Paul Cuisset. A typical RPG experience, Darkstone employs all the major and recurring tropes of the genre. You know, gems, magic, potions, spells, strange sounding characters, towering presence of evil, fatal encounters, swordplay, mana, powerful stones. That's right, they're all present. Now, the PlayStation version received mixed reviews according to the review aggregation website Metacritic. IGN said of the PC version that despite playing very similar to Diablo, it is an incredibly fun and addictive game, and that the voiceovers are clean and crisp and surprisingly well acted. For the PlayStation version, however, the website later stated anybody who liked Diablo or anything else in the realm of dungeon hack RPGs should be able to get their pocket changes worth out of it, but that the 3D presentation means that there is a loss of graphical detail and the lack of story means that it is a basic hack and slash dungeon crawler. Next Gen's November 1999 issue called the PlayStation game an addictive little title that is in some ways even better than the trendsetter is closely resembling. Now, the PC version entered at number 13 on the PC Data's computer game sales rankings for August 1999. And there were 63,553 domestic sales of the game through to the end of 1999. Now, this number rose to roughly 75 units by March 2000, which really kind of sold quite poorly. And finally, as of October 2001, the PC version had sold around 130,000 units in the US. So, overall, Darkstone was an okay game, but it didn't sell brilliantly. And I have to say, I do own this game, and I remember my dad used to play this game a lot as well. It's a good game, I liked it, but it was a little bit under the radar. Okay, now we're on to Moto Racer World Tour, which is a 2000 racing video game released for the PlayStation. And Sony Computer Entertainment released it in Europe, while Infogames released it in North America. And Moto Racer World Tour is the third part of the Moto Racer series for the PlayStation. The game offers you to race on 34 different bikes in both dirt and street bike category. Each bike's settings can be manually adjusted, and the game features 18 real-life tracks. Besides normal races, you can play a variety of different modes such as obstacle course, drag race, freestyle race where you have to perform tricks to perform points, and traffic race with normal traffic on the road. And the game also features 2-player multiplayer. Let's have a look. Okay, now it's Moto Racer 3, which was released in 2001. And again, Moto Racer 3 is an arcade-style motorcycle racing game developed by Delphine Software International, but this time it was released for Microsoft Windows. It was not a PlayStation game, this one. Moto Racer 3 expands on the offerings found in Moto Racer 2, having more types of races, including multiplayer online play. Now, Moto Racer 3 garnered mediocre reviews from its critics from its confusing menu system and unpolished feel. It typically received compilation scores of 69% and 66 out of 100 on review aggregate websites, Game Rankings and Metacritic respectively. GameSpy noted that the physics engine in the game was perfect for casual players and praised the game's various modes. However, the magazine did not like the options control, questioning why the player has to edit the game before starting it up to adjust the game's controls. And IGN stated that the game didn't give any incentive for players enough to play through the entire game. And also GameSpot criticised the game's low frame rate, but praised a variety of events. So there you go, mixed reviews. And then in 2002 was Moto Racer Advance. Moto Racer Advance is the first adaptation of the motorcycle racing series for a handheld platform. The concept is basically similar to the original games. Players race on asphalt or all-terrain tracks. And the game offers different game modes, single race, championship, league and progression. And the latter is the game's main mode, as it offers a path for the 3 main racing styles: cross, GP and traffic. By winning races, additional locations, bikes and tricks are unlocked. Each of the 3 paths can be followed separately, they do not need to be completed in a specific order, and a 4th style called Ultimate is unlocked later on in the game too. Bikes have different statistics based on maximum speed, acceleration, brakes and grip. Some of the available locations include California, England, Kenya, Moscow and San Francisco. And GP tracks have a set number of laps and an amount of opponents needs to be passed before reaching the finish line. It puts the focus on using brakes effectively to go through corners in a fluent manner. The off-road terrain tracks in cross mode are similar in concept, but demands mastery of power sliding to pass corners. And they also have bumps and rougher terrain. The traffic style is a mix with both types of terrain, but introduces AI-controlled traffic that needs to be dodged. And signs above the racers show upcoming corners with a different colour based on the sharpness, and they also warn for obstacles. While racing, a nitro is available to do a wheelie and gain more speed. It can be depleted, but it does regenerate over time. In the top of the screen holds the time and shows a horizontal bar with the positions of all the riders. Let's have a look at the game, shall we? With several great games under their belt, Delphine Software International boldly stepped into the 21st century, only to find it very unkind to them. With a total of only 3 games released, Moto Racer World Tour, Moto Racer 3 and Moto Racer Advance, the company relocated to St. Ouen in 2001. And in the next year, they were removed from the Delphine Group. In the year after that, Delphine was sold to French game development company Doki Denki. And the year after that, they closed on accounts of bankruptcy and liquidation. Around the same time, their official website also closed down, and if you attempt to open it, you will be redirected to a blank page. However, unofficial and fan-made websites do exist, and they are a testament of their adoration for the company. Though Delphine Software International may not be around anymore, through nostalgic tributes and memorabilia, and ambitious classics such as Another World, Cruise for a Corpse, Fade to Black and Flashback, their spirit still lives on. In fact, I would now like to look at the games that were released after the demise of Delphine that continue this story and legacy. So, let's have a look at those games, shall we? In 2006, Eric Chi created a new Windows version targeted at Windows XP. The resolution of this version was increased to 1280 by 800 pixels, and Chi created more detailed backgrounds. He found that his original choice to use polygons for the game characters enabled him to use the original character art at a higher resolution. The game still supports the original 320x200 resolution, as well as the original background art as an option, and it features twice as many checkpoints as the original, which makes it somewhat easier, as well as newly remixed sounds. The game does not include Interplay's extra music, but it includes the extra level, as well as the added enemies and hazards from the console versions. This version is part of Another World 15th Anniversary Edition CD-ROM, which was released in 2007, which also includes a development diary, an exclusive postcard autographed by Chi, and a separate soundtrack CD. And reviewing the 15th Anniversary Edition in 2010, Eurogamer called it still utterly beautiful, adding that the game's art style is just fantastic. Chi's design is exquisitely simple and enormously evocative. Built from spare polygons, its papercraft-like animation conjures the world, the creatures and the threat wonderfully. So there you go, that's Another World 15th Anniversary, and I have to say, it does look pretty impressive. On September the 22nd, 2011, Bulky Pix released a special 20th anniversary edition for the iPhone and iPad, featuring a switch between the original and HD graphics, new initiative touch controls or a classic D-pad, 3 difficulty modes and remastered sound effects. The Android version was also released in March 2012 and the Steam version was released on March the 4th, 2013. Okay, now we're on to Flashback Remake. So, Paul Cuset was the managing director of the video game developer Victor Cell, and he co-owns the company with game developer Lexus Numeric. Now, Cuset designed 2 games under the Victor Cell banner, one being a remake of Flashback, which was released after being announced on April 11th, 2013, with a reveal trailer. The aiming system supports 360 degrees and the game's difficulty was decreased. The PC and Xbox 360 versions received mixed reviews, while the PlayStation 3 version received unfavourable reviews, according to the review aggregation website Metacritic. And as a result of the lack of success of the Flashback remake, the company suffered from the same fate as Delphine Software, and it closed down on the 18th of November 2013 after bankruptcy and liquidation. Ouch.
What have you done, Agent Conrad Beehart?
The console versions of the 20th anniversary port were released by Digital Lounge for Xbox One, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, the Wii U and Nintendo 3DS in June 2014. The 3 PlayStation versions allow cross-platform functionality. According to Digital Lounge, the goal was simply to deliver the original experience of Another World faithfully, with the benefits of today's hardware and a high level of polish. Eric Cheese said the animations were refined to remove the rough edges revealed by such a high resolution rendering of up to 2560 by 1600 pixels. Then, in 2016, there was Moto Racer 4. Moto Racer 4 is a racing game developed by Artifact Studio and published by Microids for Microsoft Windows, the Mac, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And this is where Paul Cuset worked. He was the director of Artifact Studio at the time. Unfortunately, Moto Racer 4 received generally unfavourable reviews. Oh, dearie me. In 2017, Flashback was released worldwide on the Dreamcast, featuring graphic assets and cutscenes from the MS-DOS version and music from the Amiga version. It was a good version of the game. Then, in 2018, an updated port titled Flashback Remastered Edition was released for the Switch, PlayStation 4 and for Windows. Oh, for Christ's sake, here we go again. Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn is a 2018 beat-em-up video game developed by Big D's Productions and published by Mad Dog Games. It is a sequel to Shaq Fu, you know, that pishy game, and it was released for Microsoft Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in June 2018. Former professional basketball player Shaquille O'Neal reprises his role from the original as the player character. And A Legend Reborn features gameplay that heavily differs from its predecessor, more akin to a beat-em-up. The player character has a variety of moves such as rolling and dashing, which stuns enemies. And players can also use chain attacks together and use a special attack, but who cares? So unsurprisingly, the game received generally negative reviews upon release for all platforms except the Xbox One version, which received a more mixed response. But for me, the game is still pish. It was pish before, and it's even pisher now. Just forget about this game.
Like rice? We're here for your man.
Shaq, I didn't teach you all those moves so you could watch me get my wrinkly ass kicked.
Flashback also made its way to the mobile, available at the Apple Store and Google Play from SFL Games in 2019.
Flashback, now available on mobile.
There was also a 25th anniversary Flashback, along with Another World, which shipped as a single retail package by Microids for the PlayStation 4, Switch and Xbox One in Europe on April the 16th, 2020. In 2023, there was a Delphine Software collection package for Evercade. And this collection brings 4 games to Evercade with Amiga and console classics on one physical collection. And the games are Another World, Flashback, Future Wars and Operation Stealth. Then, a new sequel, Flashback 2 by Microids, was released on November the 16th, 2023 for the PlayStation 5, Windows and Xbox Series XS, with previous generation consoles getting their release early 2024. And the game was also designed by Paul Cuisset. And in this game, Flashback 2 is a prequel set 8 years before the original. But, unfortunately, Flashback 2 received generally unfavourable reviews according to review aggregator Metacritic, and Metacritic listed it as the second worst game of 2023. Oh my goodness gracious me. So there you go. That was my video covering the history of Delphine Software International. So much nostalgia, particularly with revisiting both Anotherworld and Flashback, both games of which I've played many an hour on my Sega Mega Drive. Really sad that they're no longer with us, and I really wish that they didn't release that Shaq Fu game. Perhaps that shitty game sealed the fate of the company, but it's fair to say that the memories and legacy continues to live on. Such great games. Anyway, thank you for watching my video. It is very much appreciated. Now please leave a comment on your thoughts of Delphine and any of the games that you may have played. Please let me know. Now remember, please like my video, and it would be even better if you would subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I mean, that would be very good. So until my next video, take care of yourself, and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye.